Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the December edition of the Wikimedia Research Showcase. My name is Dario, and I'm joined here by a number of awesome people. Today, we have a special edition of the showcase. We'll be using the entire hour to talk about some new exciting research that we're going to talk to you about in a second. But before I do this, I also want to give you a short service announcement. We just announced the upcoming Wiki Workshop, Wiki Workshop 2019. It's happening at the web conference in San Francisco in May, on the 13th or 14th of May. And the call for papers is just open as of yesterday. So please send us your contributions. The deadline for archival papers is January 31st, 2019. So we really look forward to seeing you there. And you can follow the Twitter handle Wiki Workshop if you want to have more information. With that, I'm delighted to introduce today two of the co-authors of this study, Florian Lemmerich from Aachen University, and I'm joined by Leila from Wiki Research here at the Foundation. And I'm very excited about this piece of research. This is an extension of previous research that the team has conducted with our collaborators in the past. And it's, I think it's fair to say, it's like the first series of comprehensive studies that we have on Wikimedia readership, looking at a combination of both quantitative data from our access logs, as well as the data from qualitative surveys and responses from readers. So very excited about the results that we're going to hear about. As a reminder, we also have a live Q&A on IRC. Jonathan Morgan is going to be our host there. And without further ado, Florian, you can take it from here.
Well, thank you for having me here. Actually, Leila will start and present you first.
Yeah. Leila,
okay.
Please do.
Thanks so much. Just give me a second. I'll share my screen. Okay. Oh, good. Okay, so I'll be talking about for the next few minutes about kind of the first part of this presentation about why the world reads Wikipedia. This is a joint work, as Dario said, with Florian Lemmerich, Diego Sáez, and Bob West, and the institutions that are our formal collaborators, EPFL and RWTH, Aachen University. So for those of you who are familiar with this, the first line of this research, you have heard this line, 6,000 page views per second is the number of page views that we receive by humans to Wikipedia. And this is the direct use of content that is being created by editors on Wikipedia project across languages. Now, obviously, there are a lot of questions that we have about the people that are behind these page views. Basically, who are they? What are they trying to achieve when they come to Wikipedia? How do they learn? What languages they read in? And many more questions. And what we do in this line of research is try to answer these and the many more questions that you see here. The answer to these questions are important for us because it has content implications. By the way, I should clarify when I say us, I broadly speak as basically as Wikipedia movement. So the content is, as you know, it's primarily contributed to and handled by editors. And who the audience for the content that gets created can be important for editors to know and to be aware of. It also has implications on content representation, not only on what content we put there on the projects, but how do we put it and in what form and structure and in what forms, whether it's text, whether it's image, so on and so forth. Understanding these and coming up with plans for how we represent content can rely on understanding readers better. It has impact on tool and feature development. So obviously understanding better who the audience is, again, can have impact in these areas. It also can have impact on the policies. And these are both internal policies that Wikipedia and Wikimedia sets for itself, but also in the policy negotiations that we do with outside of Wikimedia entities. And for those of you interested in the strategic direction language, this bottom line, basically understanding readers, will address some of the questions that we have around knowledge equity. Who has access to content? What type of content? Whether the content is available in their languages, in the forms that they can have access to and understand, and whose access is currently not possible, and why. So these are kind of general topics and reasons that make us interested about this line of research. And today we are going to focus on some specific questions that we will talk with you more about. What we're hoping is that by the end of this talk, you can answer the following questions. Are English Wikipedia reader behaviors and distribution of use cases representative of reader behavior in other Wikipedia languages? I think this is an important question for us to answer because a lot of research in the past years, both in terms of editorship and readership, has focused on English Wikipedia. And because English Wikipedia has a lot of requests, readership, basically requests from across many countries, one can assume that by understanding English Wikipedia, you can understand all Wikipedia languages and the needs and motivations of readers behind these languages. So I'll do spoiler alert here, and I would say what you will see by the end of this talk, that English Wikipedia is not representative, and Florian will go into details of what we have observed. And given that English Wikipedia is not representative, the next question would be, are there commonalities between reader behaviors and distribution of use cases across Wikipedia languages, and are there differences? And well, the answer to both is yes, and you will see more specifics in the following slides. There are questions around, do people read long articles, or do they often come to Wikipedia to do quick lookups? For those of us who reside mostly in Northern America and Western Europe, we see, based on our day-to-day experiences, that there is a lot of going to Wikipedia and doing quick lookups. And there's a natural question about, is our audience more and more transitioning towards these short forms of learning, or whether there are actually people who are reading the long articles? Are there readers that read science, education, research, and medicine articles more than others? And if there are, who are these people? What are their characteristics? What can we know more about them? And more. So we answer these questions by basically using surveys. What we do is that we use quick surveys, which is a feature, which is an extension on Wikimedia projects. And basically, here is how it works. The user comes to Wikipedia, let's say using an external search engine. They come to a Wikipedia page. They start traversing from one page to the other. And somewhere through their experience, if they have been sampled to participate as part of the survey, they will see a widget. I'll show you in the following slides what exactly they see, but they basically see the survey questions. And then after that, they have basically the option of continuing their experience on Wikipedia or their trajectory. What is special about this line of study that we do on why we read Wikipedia is that we don't stop at the survey level. So what we do is that we collect the responses from readers through surveys, and then we also match those or connect those responses to web request logs. And these are the logs that get collected, and for a period of time, for a short period of time, basically we have access to. And these logs will tell us the IP address of the request, the user agent, which country the request has come from, which language, Wikipedia language, this request has requested. This request has been requested. Sorry, I missed all of it. Which Wikipedia language this request has gone to, so on and so forth. We also, in this new line, in this part 2 of this research, we enter country-level statistics. So we basically, because we know which country the request has come from, we can look at the external databases and see what else we know about the country of the user, and try to answer the questions whether the country that the user is in has impact on the kind of motivations that they have when they come to Wikipedia. So I would say these 2 web request logs and country-level statistics are what make the survey responses really rich for us. We specifically use web request logs for two things that I want to mention to you before we go to the results. One is that we use that for debiasing the results, and we don't go through the details of this here. Happy to discuss this in the discussion part of this presentation, or you can read it up more in the papers. But we need basically these more granular features in order to debias the survey responses that we collect as much as possible. We also need web request logs because we are interested not only in knowing what are the distributions of readers across different motivations, but we are interested in characterizing their responses. And just to give you an example of what we mean by characterizing, while it is important to know what percentage of Spanish Wikipedia readers come to Spanish Wikipedia because they are motivated by work or school projects, it is not interesting for us to stop there once we know that number. What we need to understand in order to have a deeper understanding of these users and their needs is to understand what are the fundamental features that would allow us to characterize Wikipedia students in Spanish Wikipedia. And we will show some of the examples of what we mean by characterization in the results. So let me tell you about the survey. I'm not going to go through this taxonomy of Wikipedia readers, but we use basically the taxonomy that we developed in the first part of this research. And this taxonomy will allow us to ask 3 questions from the readers. So we will prompt the reader by telling them, why are you reading this article today? And this prompt will help the reader focus on the specific experience that they have on the article that they are reading right now. And from there, we ask them 3 questions. We ask them about their information need. So they will basically ask this question: I'm reading this article to look up a specific fact or to get a quick answer, get an overview of the topic, or get an in-depth understanding of this topic. We ask them about their prior knowledge. So we ask, prior to visiting this article, whether they are familiar with the topic and are learning it, whether they are familiar with the topic or whether they're learning it here on Wikipedia for the first time. We also ask them about their motivation, and here they can choose multiple responses. So the choices that they have is, I'm reading this article because the topic was referenced in a piece of media. I need to make a personal decision based on this topic. I'm bored and randomly exploring Wikipedia for fun. The topic came up in a conversation. I have a work or school-related assignment. I want to know more about the current event. This topic is important to me and I want to learn more about it. And the last one is an other field where they can enter basically in free form if the motivation was not captured as part of these options that they're offered to them. And here is the mechanics of how the survey works. On English Wikipedia, here's how it looks. You have a desktop request or a mobile request. And depending on which one it is, the quick survey widget that the users will see on the desktop will show up on the top right-hand side of the page. And on mobile, it will be basically under the info box. The prompt that the user sees is answer 3 questions and help us improve Wikipedia. And they have basically 3 options here. 4 options: ignore, visit the survey, no thanks, or read the privacy statement of the survey. We ran the survey for a period of 1 week, June 22 to 29 in 2017. And 14 languages were included. These languages are Arabic, Bengali, Chinese, Dutch, English, German, Hebrew, Hindi, Hungarian, Japanese, Romanian, Russian, Spanish, and Ukrainian. The choice of these Wikipedia languages come from 2 places. One is that initially we put together a set of 4 or 5 languages that were chosen based on their script, but also the language families that they represent, and we wanted to maximize kind of the diversity of the languages that we include. The additional languages were added by request from the community. There was a discussion on Wikimedia L about which other communities want to be included. So that's how we ended up with these 14 languages. We surveyed readers on mobile and desktop platforms, so no app. The sampling rate varied heavily across languages. So on English Wikipedia, we sampled on from every 40 requests, we sampled one of them. And in Bengali Wikipedia, every single reader basically saw the survey for that period of a week. And the choice of this sampling rate was basically based on the traffic that comes to that language and the need for having enough responses so that we can make assertive conclusions about the data that and results that we see. The survey was shown on article pages, and to those users we do not track off. And we collected slightly over 215,000 responses across these 14 languages. The data that we have is basically the survey responses, so the motivation, information need, and prior knowledge. We have information about the request from web request logs, so we know the country, continent, weekday, and hour where the request was requested in, the host, and the referrer class. We have information about the article because we know which article the user was on when they saw the survey. We can compute certain characteristics for this or features for this article. For example, the in degree, out degree, page rank, text length, page views, topics, and the topic entropy. And lastly, we can create sessions for the users. And then through that, we can understand not only what happened when the user responded to the survey, but within the session, within the survey session. So we look at the session length, the session duration, average dwell time, average page rank difference, average topic distance, referrer class frequency, session position, number of sessions, and then number of requests. And we use all of these features to basically look at the raw responses from the survey, debias them, characterize the responses, and that's it. So with this, I will pass it to Florian to talk about the survey results.
Yeah, thank you, Leila, for this introduction. And now let me guide you through the actual survey results. So basically what we find out with this kind of data. So let me check, does the screen sharing work?
Yep.
Okay, great. So with respect to the results, let's start with a short outline. So basically what we tried to figure out here was like 4 different types of results. So first of all, we wanted to do a robustness check with respect to the predecessor study to basically find out, well, how volatile is this reader motivation in Wikipedia? Then I will guide you to like the direct survey results. So basically, what did the people answer? And then we go a little bit more into detail into 2 different directions. The first one is what happens when we can correlate the survey results with specific behavioral patterns that we find from the request logs. And then, as Leila already hinted to, we will also look at, can we find interesting correlations of the survey results with respect to country level data? And as a kind of disclaimer, before we really start with things, well, just I want to note that averaging over all the languages which we did the survey in probably is not enough in general, because this will hide especially this heterogeneity. That is, I think, one of the big pluses of this study. Okay, but without further ado, let's start with like the first part, that is like the robustness of the results. So what you can see here in this plot is basically for all of the different survey answers, the results that we got from the 2016 study on the English Wikipedia, and what we now did get for the part of the English Wikipedia for the now current study, which we did in 2017. And the intuition for this plot is that we can just check, is there a big volatility between these 2 years? Have there been major shifts or anything? And I think just visually, if you look at me to this plot, then we'll probably also assert that in average, in general, the survey answers that we get in 2016 and 2017 are relatively robust. We see some minor deviations, with particular here in this motivation work school part, where we have a decrease from 2016 to 2017, which might be related to the seasonality. So we did the 2016 study in March and 2017 in June. But I think overall we can agree that the study results are pretty robust with the shift of the 1 year. And that also gives us, let's say, more confidence in, first of all, the research methodology that we use. And second, also that what we actually measure in our study is not just a fluke or a statistical deviation that just randomly appears, but that there's like really substance in what we can find out here. Okay, so for this robustness, I think overall we can do a big green check mark. So let's go directly to the second part of the results, and that is, well, the direct survey results, which is what you immediately get out from the surveys. Let's start with the first question, which is about the motivation. And what you see here as a result plot is like these group bar charts. Each group of these bar charts reflects the result of one of the languages. The results that you see here is already being debiased by the procedure using web request logs that Leila shortly mentioned. And for example, if you look at like for each block, the leftmost bar of each block, the blue bar, these are the respective percentages that reflect, for example, the one survey answer intrinsic learning. Also, as you will notice here for this specific question, these bars will not add up to 1, and this comes from the fact that for the motivation, readers could just check different motivations as their reason to go to Wikipedia. Okay, and if you now look at the results, what can we see as a result? Well, the first thing that you probably notice is for all of the languages, there is like a wide range of motivations. So there is not a single Wikipedia edition where you can say people go to this Wiki edition just for this one reason. The second thing that you can notice is for almost all, so that is all but 3 languages, the most often mentioned reason to go to Wikipedia is intrinsic learning. And well, that is in general also more common for the Central and Asian, Eastern European and Central Asian languages. For the 3 languages where intrinsic learning is not like top motivation, that is English, Dutch, and Japanese, here is looking up something that has been mentioned in the media is the top answer. What you can also observe is that you can see like partially strong differences between the single Wikipedia editions. And that, for example, just to show you some things, if you look at the English Wikipedia edition and the answer here for how often is Wikipedia primarily used for work-school related tasks, that is like here the purple bar, then you can see that for the English Wikipedia edition, that happens only in around 10% of the cases, while for the Spanish Wikipedia edition, that is the case for almost 30% of the cases. And just to give you another example, if you look at how often are people motivated by just being bored or randomly browsing Wikipedia, then for the Hindi or the Romanian Wikipedia edition, that amounts for only like 10% of all the survey answers, while for the English or the Japanese Wikipedia edition, that is about 20% of the survey answers. A final note maybe here on this part of the results, what you can also see is that the answer option other was only mentioned at most in 10% of the cases. So that also gives us some confidence that the taxonomy that we came up with in the predecessor study is quite robust and also holds, at least to a certain degree, also for this 2017 study. Okay, so how does it look like for the other answer options? So the second question was about the information need of different users. Sorry, what you can see here is that overall the 3 possible information needs, the 3 answer options, that is fact-checking and overview and in-depth reading, are on average relatively equally common, but you see like really strong differences between the separate languages. So as a tendency, when you look at the results, you can see that for the Western and East Central European languages like German, English, Spanish, Hungarian, or Dutch, you see that in-depth reading is less common. And for these languages, instead, you can see like fact-checking is more prevalent. One specific outlier, of course, is, as you can see here by the one high red bar, is Hindi. And for Hindi, we can observe that there almost around 2/3 of all people answer that the information need that they have is in-depth reading. And we did several checks. We also did check the translation of the survey question once again to see if there is some deviation or that could explain this kind of outlier. So far, that is really what we can see in the data. And we don't think that there's any kind of a technical error on this side. And we will also come to possible explanations later on when we look at the correlations with the country level statistics. Okay, so let's come to the third survey question, and that was about the prior knowledge. What we can see here is, as a trend, something that is similar to what we could also observe for the English edition in the last survey, and that is overall roughly the same number of people feel familiar with the content they look up on Wikipedia versus they feel unfamiliar with. And as a tendency, again, Eastern European languages like Hungarian, Romanian, Russian, Ukrainian, but also Dutch feel more familiar with the content, while Asian languages, with the exception of Japanese, report to be more unfamiliar. And one possible reason for this could maybe something that reporting that you are so far unfamiliar with a specific topic could be related to the social desirability of humility in these Asian cultures, but that to a certain degree is also just speculation. Okay, so much for the direct survey answers. Let's come to the third part of our results, and that is for these parts, we correlated the survey results with the web request logs. So how could we do that? So first of all, from the predecessor study, we found that there are several patterns in a binary form, so in a true-false form, that we could find for English Wikipedia that are correlated with some kind of behavior. For example, one possible pattern that we can find from the web request logs would be like someone is browsing at night, or someone has a session length of greater than 3. That means that he looked at more than 3 articles during his Wikipedia viewing session, and so on. So now what we can do is we can look at specific pairs of behavioral patterns as they manifest themselves in the web request logs and specific survey answers. So what we can do here is we can, for each of these pairs, we can plot, we can create a plot like the one that you can see here. And within this plot, each language has like one single dot. Where is this dot in the plot located? Well, on the x-axis here, we plot like what is the probability of the behavioral pattern given a certain survey answer. So for example, what is the probability of internal referrers, so basically of browsing Wikipedia by the link, probability of having this behavioral pattern here, an internal referrer, given a specific survey answers here being bought at random. So basically, the consequence of this is if the specific survey answers would not have any influence or any correlation with the behavioral patterns from the browsing, then these dots should be here all directly on the red line, which is the diagonal. On the other hand, if we can see that a point is significantly above the red diagonal, then we can say that in this specific language edition, there is some correlation between this behavioral pattern and the underlying survey answer. Okay, so if we can create one of these plots for all of these pairs, and actually we did this for like all these 247 pairs we had as well patterns and survey answers. And then the question is, how can we find something interesting? And that is, we sort everything by effect. So what we describe as effect here is basically what is like the average deviation from the red line to the top for each individual point. And then you can also normalize this, then you get something like a normalized mean effect. And if we sort by this here, we can find like here a long list of different associations between behavioral patterns and survey responses that hold on average between, well, the survey answers and the behavioral patterns. And just to show you a couple of them, which are specifically, well, significant, what we can, for example, see, which holds across all language editions on average, is, for example, that bored and randomly motivated users, so users that give as the motivation being bored or just randomly browsing Wikipedia, can be associated with long sessions, so they browse many different articles. They use basically internal navigation, so not so much just coming from Google and looking at one page and leaving again, but they are using like the link structure of Wikipedia. They also do more often than the regular users surf Wikipedia at night times. And they also have like short time between the requests. So this might be a hint that they don't really read the articles like in detail, but they just skip to the next article, going down the rabbit hole. Another thing that we can associate is like when people are motivated by being work or school, Then we can associate this with desktop usage, so then they are not using a mobile platform. People have then long intervals between the different requests to Wikipedia articles, and these kind of tasks also more often than others occur in the afternoon. And to give you like a third example, we can being motivated by conversation. So something came up in a conversation. We can correlate this kind of survey answers with less internal navigation. So this is more like a quick fact checkup. This happens more often from a mobile platform, and we also have just short dwelling times on the individual articles. Okay, so these are effects that hold on average, and most of these common effects also are relatively stable across the different languages. So for example, when you look here at the A in the upper left corner, then you can see you have the effect in the same direction, basically all of the languages. That, however, does not hold for most of the associations we can form with like work-school related behavior. So basically what you can see on the second plot, on the B plot, is you have like a widespread of different effects, so distances to the red diagonal for all the different languages. So that gives us a hint that actually work-school related browsing of Wikipedia is in fact hugely different across the different language editions. What we can also observe is that in general, the spread across the language editions is stronger than the effect of the motivation. So basically the distance here from the left to the right is much larger than basically the distance that you have from the individual language data points to the red line. And finally, what we also can see when we compare the results with results that we got from the predecessor study is that we find that not all of the patterns that we could see for the English Wikipedia hold across all languages. So for example, for the English Wikipedia in the last study and also for this study, we could observe that if people mention as their motivation that they are being motivated by a current event, then they are more likely to look at a longer article. And this, as I said, also holds here for the English Wikipedia, but as you can see about all the other plots, that does not hold in general for all Wikipedia editions. Okay, so let's come to the last and fourth part of the results. And that is, here we correlated survey responses with country statistics. So how did we do this? So actually, we had this survey answers, and for each of the survey answers, we knew from which country the respective survey request came from. So what we did next is we split the data by the language and by the country level. So basically, we get now one data point for each pair of a country and a language. And if we filter this for country language pairs that have at least 500 responses, then we end up with 43 different language pairs. And for each of these pairs, of course, we can now, on one hand, compute like what is the share of a specific survey answer. So, for example, how often did people give as their answer that they are being motivated by intrinsic learning? And on the other hand, since this is now on a country level, we can get data on the specific country, for example, on the socio-economic status. And the one main statistic that we here focused on is the so-called Human Development Index, HDI. And this is some geometric mean of the life expectancy, the education, and some indicator for the income and the people there. And what we could find then, I think, was for me one of the most interesting findings of this study, and that is that we can really find clear correlations between certain survey answers, that is certain motivations and intents of Wikipedia readers, with the socioeconomic status of the country they have been in. And in particular, what we find here, for example, here in the line with media and work school, is the higher developed, the more industrialized the country is, the more likely it is that people are motivated by media, and the less likely it is that they are motivated by some task related to work or school. And an even clearer correlation is when we go to this information need question. So what we find here is with a correlation coefficient of 0.66, people are more often, people use Wikipedia more often for just fact-checking when they are in a more industrialized country compared to in-depth reading. And if you look for in-depth reading, for example, then we can see that there is a strong negative correlation. The more highly industrialized the country is, the less common is really in-depth reading. And this gives us a hint that really the use cases of Wikipedia are not like homogeneous across all countries for the whole earth, but Wikipedia is used differently across the world. Okay, so based on this finding, we also tried to zoom in a little bit more. And for this, we specifically looked at the Spanish Wikipedia. And why did we choose the Spanish Wikipedia? Well, the reason for that is that the Spanish Wikipedia is read in a wide range of different countries and differently developed countries. So basically, we have like the highly developed industrialized countries in Europe, and also Spanish minorities in France or GB, for example. And Spanish is, on the other hand, also spoken, for example, in complete Latin America with different ranges of developments, and also, for example, the Philippines. So basically, for the Spanish Wikipedia edition, we see like the complete range of different countries with different use cases. So what can we do with this kind of information? So basically, for the Spanish Wikipedia, as for the other Wikipedias also, we could use LDA, latent directly allocation, to find topics in the Wikipedia. And then we correlate the specific topics which we manually labeled with the HDI, the Human Development Index, in the respective country. And what we find now is something that fits well to the result that we had previously, and that is for a topic like math, physics, and technology, research and education, or medicine and biology. We see like a really strong correlation coefficient by, well, less than 0, minus 0.7, sorry, with the HDI. So basically, the more highly developed the country is, the less of these scientific academic topics are viewed on Wikipedia. And on the other hand, if you look at more like leisure and entertainment topics like media culture or sports and teams, numbers, lists, and sports, then we can see that there's a clear positive correlation with the HDI. So basically, these kinds of topics are more often viewed in the higher developed countries. Okay, so let me summarize what we did here in the study and what we found out. So what we did in the study, we surveyed Wikipedia users about their intents in 14 different language editions, and we received more than 215,000 survey responses. And what we also had as information source was we had access to the web request logs. And by combining these two data sources, we could achieve two different things. The one thing is that we could use the web request logs to de-bias the potential biases that we had in the survey requests. And on the other hand, we could also find association between specific use cases and user behavior as they manifest themselves in the web request logs. And then based on this kind of data, we could get to different kinds of findings. So for example, we could find that the behavior across Wikipedia language editions is motivated by a wide range of different intents in all of the editions, but also the prevalence of these different intents varies strongly across the Wikipedia editions. And English is not in all cases representative for all languages. In many cases, it's even more like an outlier. A second finding is that there are some patterns that hold across languages, patterns that associate specific user intents with use cases. On the other hand, not all of these patterns that we could find for the English Wikipedia in the last study hold across all languages. So also here we see that there is some heterogeneity between the Wikipedia editions. And finally, we could find strong correlations between socioeconomic indicators on a country level with specific Wikipedia use cases in these countries. Okay, so that's basically what we find in this study, or these are the main points that we find in this study. Maybe some ideas where we could go next. So one thing that we basically opened up with the last study with correlating with these socioeconomic indicators on a country level, which seems from a knowledge equity point of view super interesting to me, is like the socio-demographics of Wikipedia readers. So first of all, to quantify them, but also to try and characterize the motivations of specific user groups, like what is the different motivation of young people or female Wikipedia readers compared to the others. Then another open point with respect to these socio-demographics is, can we find inequalities that are finer than just on a country level? And of course, depending or associated with this question of socio-demographics, also can we find out like who is currently not reading Wikipedia at all, and maybe can we help these people find to Wikipedia? Another completely different point of view is how, or another research question is, what about language switching behavior? So far, the complete studies that we did was always focused on one Wikipedia edition after the other. But actually, many people switch languages between or within their Wikipedia reading session. And investigating how often does this occur, between which pages, in which topics does this occur specifically, why do people switch languages within a session, would also be like another interesting research direction for the future. And finally, so one task we did not succeed in so far was really coming up with a good quantification for a specific Wikipedia article. What are the prevalent use cases for this specific article? And one idea we are currently floating right now is maybe we can have a data challenge and let the community help us with this, well, methodological problem. So share your question with us. Sorry. So thank you all. The paper is already uploaded in archive. You can find it here under this address. Thank you all for having me here. There's also an ongoing documentation of our work, which is, well, still in its growing phase. And thank you all. And, well, I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Florian and Leila. It was a great presentation. Also, it'd be useful to remind people that this work will be presented at Wisdom next year, because I don't think we mentioned that. So I'm gonna ask Jonathan to relay questions from a variety of channels. I was also looking at YouTube, but it doesn't look like there's questions there. So Jonathan.
Hi. So we have at least 2 questions for you, Florian. So the first question is from Aaron Halfacre, and he asks, were article lengths normalized by the article length distribution for each wiki? There are more long articles about popular topics in bigger wikis than in smaller ones.
Florian, you're muted.
Thanks, Leila. The answer is no, we did not normalize for that. But so there, we basically used the fixed threshold of, I think, what was a long article, something like 4,000 characters. I'm not sure about the number anymore. But we did not normalize that to make it like more comparable across the different things. Actually, what we are interested in, however, does not depend on just the article length, but it's basically how common is visiting an article of this length with when you have a certain intention compared to when you do not have a certain intention. So even if on general more articles have this specific length, then we still would see like an effect if the motivation is a specific one.
Excellent, thank you. One more question from IRC, and then I believe Dario has a question. This question comes from user Netrom, Morten Warnke Wang. Netrom asks, is this survey now a yearly event? If so, will the languages stay the same, or are there plans to change it? And could you discuss why it would change or not?
Well, this question I will relate to Leila.
Yeah, it was almost going to be a yearly event, and we missed 2018. So I think the choice of languages will continue to be in part relying on the communities, like the editor communities and their availability and willingness and interest in this research. So I would say at least parts of the languages, whether they appear or not, is whether there is request by the community. And then we always, for any kind of language related study that we do, we still need some diversity of languages, right? So if community X decides that, no, we don't want to participate in the second round of or third round of this research, then we will need to look into other communities who may be interested to do it. So I would say the choice of languages may change, and this really primarily relies on the community choices, editor community choices moving forward. And just to give a sense of why this is the way it is. I mean, obviously the community should be happy if a survey is going to go under Wikipedia, but also that we rely heavily on them for this research. This is something that we didn't mention in this presentation, but we need for each language that participates in the survey, we need one point of contact from that community who's going to basically talk and make a case for their community that this is a good thing to do. And they will answer all the questions throughout the study that comes up in their language community. And they also spend hours with us for the translation of the survey in their language. As you can imagine, the translation for this kind of research is very tricky. And we tried to outsource this by doing paid translation, and it didn't really work out well. So we rely on editors who are interested in this research to come and work with us to have quality research moving forward. So that's another thing that we need to take into account when we choose languages.
Excellent, thank you. We have a question from YouTube. This question comes from James Salzman, and James asks, are there any recommendations for editors, developers, and reusers of Wikimedia content or opportunities to operationalize the results of any research survey or reader behavior analysis research?
Yeah,
and I posted in the sidebar in case you didn't understand my garbled question.
Yeah, thanks. So I think I can take this one. This is a good question. So I think one thing Florian mentioned is that, okay, so let me step back. I think one of the things that would be really interesting in terms of the editor experience and the reader experience is if we can find ways to bring editors and readers' experiences closer to each other. So at the moment, from the editor perspective, the reader is really represented at best in terms of their page views, the page views that they bring to a Wikipedia article, and maybe some other characteristics. But editors, for the most part, don't have a very deep understanding of the readers of their language and their articles. So one thing Florian mentioned that, for example, the idea that we had for the data challenge was, can we have a system in place that for every Wikipedia article in a given language can tell the editor what is the distribution, the predicted distribution of use cases of this article, right? So if you are an editor and you know 90% of the people who are going to come and read this page are people who are motivated by work or school related topics, or are people who are going to do fact-checking versus in-depth reading, this is the kind of information that may inform you as an editor how to write the content for this article. So that's kind of one line. And then the other, in terms of operationalizing, I think one thing which at the high level and is important that we have learned through this study is that it seems that one-size-fits-all solutions will not work, in the sense that we need to probably have tools and features and development happening at the central and almost like homogeneous level across all projects. These are going to be for the basic needs of the readers. But then because the readers, the distribution of the use cases of Wikipedia and also the characteristics of readers is very different across languages, I think there's more work needs to be done for us to understand how to do tool development. So I would say it's informing some of the discussions right now around whether we should go down the path of more distributed model or not for readership. I don't have, it's really outside of the scope of really my space to think about the actual product, but I'm hoping that it can inform those kind of discussions.
Excellent, thank you, Leila. And no other questions on YouTube or IRC at the moment. Dario, do you want to ask yours?
Yeah, so a question that goes back to something we discussed during the early stages of the project, but I think it's also useful to unpack it here for the audience. But you touched, Florian, on what is not on Wikipedia and what readers will not find on Wikipedia. So the question of how coverage affects readership is a very critical one for this study. What we're observing here is not an abstract notion of a reader, but is a combination of a reader that happens to be on Wikipedia because of what's on Wikipedia in any given language or any specific topic.
Yeah, yes and no. So if you think, for example, back to the last part that I presented with the topics for Spanish Wikipedia. So basically, all readers of the Spanish Wikipedia have access to the same content, but still what they look up at Wikipedia is different depending on their socioeconomic context.
Correct. But yeah, bear with me. I want to ask you a question more specifically about this. So, well, we know that something that is not covered in Wikipedia by design, we will not see, because the way in which studies is designed, like this is really looking at requests that result in at least some visit to Wikipedia. If the topics completely missing, of course, we're not capturing that. If a topic in any given language is covered by another very prominent reference work, say, I'm just going to make this up. If in Hungarian, there's a very popular source that provides information along any of these dimensions, these are something that's going to affect our study, which is great, I think, acknowledged in the study itself. I have a question is more related to the actual topic distribution within the language. A language having a higher prevalence of topics in, say, a given area that may be more relevant for some motivations, say more academic topics or more pop culture topics, presumably will give different opportunities for people to browse and link and follow links to these topics, and would thereby affect also what we see in terms of their browsing patterns. So my question is like, what are your thoughts about the intrinsic distribution within a language edition of topics when it comes to comparing across languages, the probability people have of browsing while still being the same information need mode? That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's not so easy to answer. I mean, first of all, how do we measure? I mean, right now we are still struggling with like finding for an article, what are the motivations for this article? And as long as we cannot quantify this, I think it's super difficult to measure on an aggregated level, like what is this type of Wikipedia edition actually supporting? So basically, if we think of it as building blocks, I think what we have to say first is, what we have to solve first is basically, can we find from an article content and the embedding of the article in the Wikipedia network, what is like a typical use case for this article, and then extrapolate from there. But of course, it's something like an hen-egg problem, right? So the motivation of the Wikipedia readers is like it is because the content it is like it is there, and then of course the content is also probably shaped in some form regarding to these use cases.
Yeah, I was thinking of some normalization as a function of the topic distribution within a language or something more in that direction. But yeah, it's a very good point of focusing on the article level is the right next step. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No additional questions on IRC.
In that case, I'd like to kind of build on that. So when we talk about the Human Development Index results, I think there's kind of two different ways of looking at that. One is that socioeconomic status is correlated with these varying motivations or other information needs. The other question is getting back to who is, and it's not on Wikipedia, which is in some of these countries with maybe a lower HDI. We're seeing a very selective group of readers who are on Wikipedia, and I was wondering if you had any insight into the degree to which you're seeing self-selection into, or not self-selection, but selection into reading Wikipedia versus actual SES-related variation.
So the question is, so basically, what is really dependent on the socioeconomic status, and what is like with things that are present in these countries? Or
yeah, because you can imagine a country with a low HDI, but that would mean that the only people for possibly reading Wikipedia are people at the higher end of the socioeconomic status, given the context of that country.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, basically, we do not know, like, on a finer granularity, who are the people in this country who really look at Wikipedia. That also goes into the direction where we would like to go next. So when we could ask people, in addition to these motivations, also like, what is their demographic background, age, gender, but maybe also like what is their education and their income. And we could get at least like one step nearer to these kind of questions. Like, is there a certain group within a population of a country that really looks at the Wikipedia content and what is like their need? And that, of course, points then back to, okay, when we know who reads Wikipedia within the country, we also see like who is not reading Wikipedia in this country. And we see like maybe what is missing, either in terms of content or in terms of access possibilities.
I have one more piece then. I think there's a really cool aspect of this study in terms of methodology, which is the debiasing of the surveys. You talked about it briefly, and I know there's some more details in the paper. I was wondering if you could say a little bit about the types of motivations that were more likely to be answering the survey or less likely to be answering the survey.
Yeah, so out of my head, I don't know much. So what I can tell you, what is definite an effect of doing this debiasing is that the motivation board random gets much less weight than it would have when you have like just the direct survey answers, which intuitively makes sense, right? So if someone is just bored and randomly browsing Wikipedia, then he's just more likely to answer a survey compared to someone else. And the way that manifests itself in the actual method is if you have someone who has like many requests and many short requests, then this on average gets downrated.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We have one more question from IRC that's hot off the presses. This is from Tillman Bear. Tillman says, a follow-up question to Leila's remarks on the product/interface implications of these results. Does the team happen to have concrete suggestions or ideas for products or changes that could be informed by what we learned from this work?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tillman. I tend to thread this line kind of very carefully because we are really, as much as we would like to be further ahead, we are in early stages really for this work. So I would say one thing that if we get to a point that we can predict the distribution of use cases at the article level, then we are close to making some recommendations or suggestions at the product level. The other suggestion that I would have would be kind of more general and maybe reinforcing some of the conversations that are already happening in the product teams at Wikimedia Foundation, which is, again, it seems like kind of the centralized solutions are not going to be the only solutions for readers, and we need to kind of think about more distributed ways for readers to customize the experience that they have on Wikipedia.
Can you expand when you say centralized? I'm not sure it's entirely clear what you mean by centralized.
Right. So the question is, do we have systems that basically decide, do we want to do personalization for the readers at the aggregate high level? So let's say at the language level or at across languages level. Or do we want to allow the reader to tell us what they need, what are the specifics and dimensions that they want to have control over. And based on those, we basically give them the basics of tools and features to build the experience that they want to have on Wikipedia. And I think that line of discussions and thinking about product ideas seem to be reinforced by the results that we see in this research. Because of the facts that readers' motivations or the distributions of motivations and also their characteristics seem to be different across these languages, it seems we cannot possibly think about, just as an example, recommendation systems, let's say article read recommendation systems that work in one way, one algorithm that handles things in one specific way for all languages. We need to think about how to become more granular without making the system too complex in terms of product development, and design systems that would allow the reader to pick and choose.
Jonathan, anything else? No channels?
No additional questions on the channels at the moment.
Continue. Okay, then I'll ask another quick question about like two specific use cases that are particularly interesting. One is we know that actually two are very related. We know that Wikipedia articles, like long form articles, are typically not very well suited for finding very specific bits of information. So anecdotally and qualitatively, we know that in many cases when people are looking for a specific fact or piece of information that is not already visible in the
so you're talking from the perspective of a highly developed country, right? You're already assuming that you want to do fact checking.
Oh yeah, I'm just describing something that we have qualitative evidence that's happening. Something we know that many people give up in many cases, like reading Wikipedia articles because they cannot find what they're looking for. And this behavior of going back and forth with search engine is a very common one, where people like refine their queries, use a search engine, go back to Wikipedia. In some cases, we know that there's many people just asking directly a question that might be sourced to Wikipedia on a search engine because it's easier to find it there, find directly the answer. So there's pretty extensive evidence that this is the case, regardless of whether this is more prevalent in Western or non-Western countries. But the question is whether, A, you have found anything within the data that you collected that might be indicative of this behavior, like basically dead ends in information search, when people are looking for something specifically that doesn't result in what they're looking for. Of course, inferring whether they found what they're looking for is a tricky question. And in general, if there's something in your future direction that we can look into related to using the referral class for better studying this like a cross-platform behavior that we know happens on our sites.
Yeah, I think the short answer for this is at least using this user identification that we currently are using. That was one topic that we did not talk about much. So we do not have like any cookie tracking or anything. So basically, we are relying on user identification, on a concatenation of the IP address in the user agent. At least giving like this kind of user tracking thing. I think even the majority of the users just has like a single access request to Wikipedia articles. And that, of course, also means that the majority of the users just directly come from some search engine, look something up on Wikipedia, and are never seen again, at least from our perspective. And that, of course, makes a lot of follow-up questions super difficult because the people just have like one visit.
Right.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, I think one thing which is related to your question, Dario, is that what we observed that on average, roughly 20% of the reader sessions involve switching from one language to another, one Wikipedia language to another Wikipedia language. And that is something interesting to look into. Why do people switch? On what topics do they switch? I think that can be related to the fact that whether they find the content in the language that they're reading, whether that's the motivation for them switching. Is the content there, but then there's certain types of content that you understand better or more easily in another language, or actually the content is missing, and that's why the reader is switching.
Yeah.
But that's only one part of what you're asking.
Thank you.
No new questions have come in.
Sorry, I missed that. No other question or additional question? No. Okay. All right. So I think with that, if there's no other question, we should close it here. So again, virtual round of applause for our two speakers. Thanks for joining today, Florian. Thanks, Leila, for co-presenting this. This closes the 2018 series. So happy holidays, everybody. If you're celebrating or taking a break in the coming days. We'll be coming back in January in the new year with a new brand series of the Research Showcase. See you all, everybody.